Welcome to another edition of The Greater Work, the audio outreach of Christ Worker Ministries. Listen in as experienced employee and minister, Sean Gibson brings biblical insights to help you worship God both in and with your labor. Now, let's get to work. Everyone is motivated by a few things. Typically, it's something like money, power, titles, or even recognition from others. Having worked in Fortune 500s, mid-level companies, and even startup environments, I've seen a lot of tactics used in corporate life to motivate employees to work extra hard and drive additional profits. When I first got started in the professional world, I worked in an office that used gift cards as motivators to drive additional sales. These gift cards not only motivated me, but they motivated the entire office. Were these gift cards of any significant value? Not really. Many times these were just $25 or $50 gift cards to a box store or a home goods store. Was our salary not enough to allow us to buy these things on our own? No, not at all. But really the thing here was that it was about whoever earned that card meant that they were the best for that day. And frankly, who doesn't like to be known as the best for that day? Further on in my career, I won trips for my sales performance, watches, and even diamond pendants. Again, these things can be great motivators. However, there is a flip side to using these tactics in corporate life, and I've seen those effects firsthand as well. Companies have promised me over my career the sun, the moon, and even the stars to motivate me to accomplish specific objectives. And unfortunately, after achieving these goals, either they went back on their word or said that I did not technically achieve the goal because of some minor technicality. They benefited from my hard work and frankly took advantage of me by not giving me what I had rightly earned. In today's podcast, I want to address these deceitful motivational tactics that are used in the workplace. And I want us to look at how we as Christians can rise above these tactics. And I also want us to take a look at really how we can, in spite of this, still live for Christ in the process. Thankfully, the Bible is full of authentic experiences that real people lived through and also overcame. From Adam to Jesus, there's many answers for many of the corporate life situations that we face even today. One particular character in the Bible that I love reading about was Jacob. Jacob worked for his father-in-law, and he was constantly subject to his father-in-law's deceitful tactics and, frankly, out-and-out lies. Yet if you look at Genesis chapters 29 through 31, you'll find that Jacob was in a season of life where really he was becoming a man. By that I mean he got married, started having kids, and he worked his way up the corporate ladder of his father-in-law's livestock business. When Jacob first showed up at Laban's home, Jacob fell in love with one of Laban's daughters, Rachel. The Bible describes her as absolutely stunning. He proposed to Laban, Rachel's father, that he would work for 7 years to marry this beautiful daughter. Laban agreed to the arrangement. After Jacob had fulfilled his pledge of working for Laban for 7 years, it was now time for Jacob to receive his bride. However, Laban, being a crafty guy, decided that instead of giving Jacob the woman that he had worked for so hard, he secretly gave Rachel's older sister, Leah, to Jacob. In this culture, the older sister had to be married first, so it only made sense to provide Jacob with Leah first. And this all made sense in Laban's mind. Laban hid this deception from Jacob by keeping Leah covered during the wedding so that Jacob could not truly see who he was marrying. It wasn't until the following day, after Jacob and Leah had consummated their marriage, that Jacob noticed that the woman he had worked so hard for was not Rachel, but Leah. Jacob was really upset, and I think that makes sense. He went right to Laban to complain, "Hey, you didn't live up to your end of the bargain. I worked for you for 7 years. This is when Laban decided to inform Jacob of his culture, and that if he wanted to still marry Rachel, he'd have to work for an additional 7 years to get her as well. Now let's talk about this. This is 14 years in total for Rachel. Can you imagine that? 7 years passed, and Jacob finally got to marry Rachel. And over time, both wives provided children for Jacob. And as time went on, Laban promised to pay Jacob a set wage. And over those seasons, 10 times it was spoken of, Laban robbed Jacob of his due pay and benefits. However, God blessed Jacob. When we read in Genesis 30, verse 43, it says that Jacob became exceedingly prosperous. He owned large flocks, maidservants, men servants, and even camels and donkeys. In spite of all the craziness that Laban brought to Jacob, God blessed Jacob with great wisdom and wealth. This brings me to point number 1 when dealing with deceptive tactics in the workplace. You can endure and be blessed while waiting for God to move on your behalf while you wait for another job, or potentially your boss gets moved out for being deceptive. Just as God blessed Jacob, God can richly bless you regardless of how your manager is taking advantage of you. God had to use really these several challenging years in Jacob's life to build his character, which he lacked, and also change some of Jacob's bad habits. In case you don't know, the name Jacob means liar, and God had to work that out of him. Continuing on, we get to read about how Jacob handled his difficult work situations. Like any of us, Jacob got to the point where he had had enough. No more tricks, and frankly, God was getting sick of these tricks too. As we read in Genesis 31, verse 3, the Lord came to Jacob and said, "Go back to the land of your fathers and to your kindred, and I will be with you." This brings me to my second point. When you are being taken advantage of in the workplace by, let's say, changing comp plans or deceitful tactics, understand that God is aware of what's going on, and he will be the one to tell you when to go, if you are to go. Again, as I said earlier, God may move you or your boss out instead, but either way, things are not going to stay the same, and he's going to let you know. In Genesis 31, verses 5 through 7, Jacob decided to have a conversation with both of his wives. He said this, "I can see from your father's countenance that his attitude towards me has changed. But the God of my fathers has come to me. You know that I serve your father with all my strength, and although he's cheated me and changed my wages 10 times, God has not allowed him to harm me." After Jacob had talked with both of his wives, this was their reply in verse 13. "Surely all the wealth that God had taken from our father now belongs to you. Do whatever God has told you to do, Jacob." Before Jacob decided to leave Laban, his father-in-law, he decided to consult with his wives. And this brings us to our third point. Consult with at least 2 or 3 people about your decision. In Jacob's case, he talked to his wives. Of course, it's always wise to consult with your spouse about a work decision. However, you may also want to get the perspective from someone else, like a pastor, a close friend, a parent, even a coworker. Either way, the Bible promotes this type of thinking in Proverbs 15, verse 22. "Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed." Before Jacob decided to leave, he consulted with the only people that he could trust that were around him, and only then did he decide to move. My friend, if you're dealing with being taken advantage of or falling prey to deceitful tactics in the workplace, just know that this is not going to be a lifelong situation. Things change, people change, and God has a way of making these changes occur. Until this change happens, continue to endure and work unto God. He will reward you just like he did with Jacob. Join me next week on the Greater Work Podcast as I share practical steps that you can take to live victoriously among the wolves in the workplace. Also visit christworker.org for additional tools and teachings on how you too can experience the presence of God in your work life. Thanks for listening to The Greater Work, a Christ Worker Ministries podcast. The Greater Work is supported by hardworking listeners just like you. To learn more about Christ Worker Ministries and how you can become part of our growing outreach, visit christworker.org.